Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And Wargaming just released some exciting details from the Super Test server, which candidly is apparently calling a Super Test leak. Although really for me it just feels like information release, and it's exciting because we get to see Tier 1 to Tier 7 of the Italian tanks. And while firstly I'd like to clarify that everything that you see, especially the characteristics, are subject to change. We're going to be taking a look at the Fiat 3000, the L6040, the M1441, the M1542, the P2640, the P43, the P43 Bis, and finally the P43 Ter. So without further ado, let's take a look to see what we've got to look forward to from the Italian medium branch. So firstly, the Fiat 3000. What is the first tank in the line going to be all about? Well, this vehicle is based on the French Renault FT, and you can clearly see that from the resemblance, and yeah, everything about this tank statistically is just pretty okay really, nothing exceptional, probably one that I'm not really going to enjoy too much at Tier 1 because it's limited to 21 kilometers an hour, but we'll just have to wait and see what the hidden statistics of this vehicle are like, as the power to weight, the gun depression, the ground resistances are going to make a big difference, and we're not going to be seeing any of those for any of the comparisons in this video. So next up, Tier 2, and there are actually two Tier 2 tanks that I'm going to be looking at. Firstly, a light tank, the L640, and your frontal armor over doubles as you make the step up. The vehicle is also massively faster, limited to 42 kilometers an hour. It should be able to get around at least reasonably. And this light tank has a little pop autoloader, as we can see, with 12 shells in the magazine, doing 11 damage each, with pretty darn decent penetration for Tier 2. 38 millimeters, that's way better than a lot of tanks are packing. And with 320 meters of view range allowing you to start a spot for yourself, I think this thing could be quite fun at Tier 2, especially if it gets a decent amount of gun depression, but again, that's going to make or break the tank. If light tanks aren't quite your thing, there's also a medium tank, the M14/41, and this vehicle has better turret armor and also better side armor compared to the light tank, but it's significantly slower with regards to its traverse speed, and also with its top speed limit at 32 kilometers an hour. Its view range is also significantly less, but that is quite a nice gun. 52 millimeters of penetration at Tier 2 is more than enough, and 50 alpha damage. With okay accuracy, this thing looks like it could be quite a nice little sniper if you set it up with your binoculars. Next up, Tier 3 M1542, and I've taken the liberty of noting all of the statistics down here so we can compare. And we can see that this vehicle has significantly more armor at the front, but 42 millimeters still isn't really anything to write home about. A little bit more view range, but 320 certainly isn't amazing at Tier 3. The vehicle's faster than its predecessor, it has more penetration, it's more accurate, but it has the same alpha damage. And currently its DPM is going to be about 1,364. Yeah, maybe this one will be a little bit forgettable, but an all-rounder again at Tier 3. Next up, jumping up to Tier 4, it's the P2640. And once again, baby steps here at Tier 4. A little bit more hit points, 50 millimeters of frontal armor. The vehicle has a touch more view range. It's identical with regards to its speed limits, more penetration, especially on its premium rounds, and its alpha damage goes up to 110, which is delicious. And one thing that also surprises me is, why is the high explosive penetration of this tank so high? 70 millimeters? Wow, this thing could be quite a little derper at Tier 4 with 175 alpha damage. With this increase in caliber, however, you lose accuracy, a bit of aim time, but your DPM goes up, and wow, it'll be very impressive if you manage to penetrate high explosive rounds with this vehicle, as that will greatly increase your overall damage per minute. Next up, let's bump up to Tier 5, and we become the P43. And this is where you make the most substantial upgrade of the hull armor in this comparison, up to 80 millimeters at the front of the hull in front of the turret. You're going to be able to bounce a few things at Tier 5 with that, but still not absolutely incredible. Your view range goes up to 350, which is a welcome advantage. Your speed marginally increases as well, and your penetration is up to 118 with its standard rounds, but look, its high explosive penetration dips down. Maybe this is a typo or just some kind of an error with the high explosive rounds there, as it looks like we're just making baby steps up this tech tree. However, this is where things change when we hit Tier 6 and look at the P43 Bis. And this thing looks very futuristic, doesn't it, compared to the previous tank? And this thing statistically looks to be an absolute monster, but remember, everything is subject to change. A good step up in hit points, although still not impressive. That same 80 millimeters of hull armor and 360 meters view range, it goes at 50 kilometers an hour forwards, 20 backwards. But look at this gun, 140 millimeters of pen on its standard rounds, 180 on its premium rounds, but 240 alpha damage, ladies and gentlemen. And one thing that's bizarre about this tank is that currently it still has a 7.5 rounds a minute rate of fire. That's the kind of rate of fire that a medium tank has at Tier 8, especially for 240 alpha damage. And then if they leave this 90 millimeter gun on this Tier 6, it's looking like it could be probably one of the better tier 6 medium tanks in the game. But once again, I think that gun depression and hidden statistics like ground resistances will make or break this vehicle, as well as we have no idea what its engine's going to be. Nevertheless, for me, this looks like one of the highlights of the Italian tech tree so far, and it's so nice that there's going to be a competitive tier 6 tank if statistics stay as they are. Because quite often we have to wait for either tier 8, 9 or 10 before we get to really enjoy the tech tree. And then finally we're jumping up to tier 7 for the P43 Ter. And yeah, pretty standard step up here. Hit points, 20mm of armor on the front of the hull and the turret. 100mm is pretty good for a tier 7 tank, inside a good matchup at least. It's faster with 380 meters view range. That is nice for tier 7. It also goes at 55 kilometers an hour, making it quite nippy. And its penetration isn't that bad for a tier 7 medium. 152 isn't great, but it's not terrible. But this is where I'm confused, and I think Wargaming, surely they must have made a typo. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the penetration here on its third shell, which clearly is either high explosive or HESH or HEP. It says 154mm. But for me personally, I think they've just added an extra one. It would kind of make more sense if maybe it had 54mm of penetration, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, Wargaming hasn't been able to clarify this for me, but the high explosive penetration on the tier 4 and the tier 7 just currently look out of place. Maybe it's intended, maybe it's meant to be a feature. If that's the case, then I don't really like that. I don't like the idea of medium tanks bombing it around, firing high explosive rounds. But I'm not going to talk about that any further because I think it's a typo, and I'll only really start to worry about that if we see it on a test server or in future statistics releases. Apart from that, it feels a little bit disappointing to have 240 alpha damage when your rate of fire on this tank actually goes down a little bit. The reloading time is 7.5 seconds there, while it's 8 seconds on the tier 7, which kind of surprises me a little bit, as I would far rather play the tier 6 tier for tier than the tier 7. And so that about covers it for Wargaming's miniature release of content on the Italian tanks. I don't usually talk about these super test leaks, as they're calling them. Well, for me it just looks like content release, as I prefer to have the final statistics or have my hands on the actual gameplay before I talk about it. But considering this was a whole new line and it really gives us an idea of what Wargaming are planning with these Italian tanks, I felt it would be worth your time. And Candly says in her post that Wargaming plan to drop info on the top tier Italian tanks later, with an in-depth look beginning at tier 8 of the vehicles receiving its signature auto reloader system. And it looks like the plan is to super test Italian tanks soon after the 1.0 update. So that wouldn't surprise me if Wargaming were perhaps looking on trying to get the tier 8 premium out ASAP really. Anyway, stay tuned to the channel. I'll let you know everything as soon as I do. And so that's about it today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful for you. If it was, please consider giving it a thumbs up, but if you hated the video, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about the early characteristics of these Italian tanks. Do you think that they look absolutely awesome? Do you think they look disappointing? And most importantly, do they look like your kind of tanks? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.